Few people realize the role that the D.C. Booth Historic Fish Hatchery played in the pioneering of trout management in the western United States, or the interesting role it plays today for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. America's interest in fish rose when the public became concerned about the disappearance of fish along the Atlantic coast and inland waters. In 1871, Congress responded by creating the U.S. Fish Commission to investigate the problem. In 1872, the scope of the commission's work was expanded to undertake programs to breed and distribute fish. To assist this work, several hatcheries were constructed around the country. Meanwhile, in the Black Hills of Dakota Territory, 1876 was the year of the gold rush. The new settlers found a beautiful region filled with mountain streams, but the only fish were minnows and several varieties of suckers. Native Americans had for ages past traveled long distances to spear fish in this stream. From that legend comes the name for the town of Spearfish. There was increased interest in the federal stocking of Black Hill streams. However, distances from existing hatchery facilities and transportation problems limited the trout potential of the area. A Black Hills trout hatchery would solve these problems. The coming of the railroad in the 1890s provided better access to the hills, and in the fall of 1892 and the summer of 1893, U.S. Fish Commission research expeditions examined the insect, plant, and animal life in Black Hill streams. Both reports agreed water quality was excellent and freshwater shrimp and other natural trout foods were abundant. Here were waters that could become premier trout streams. With the transportation and trout habitat questions answered, politics entered the picture. Colorful South Dakota U.S. Senator Richard F. Pettigrew pushed through a bill June 11, 1896, appropriating $5,000 for the establishment of a fish cultural station at some point in the Black Hills of South Dakota. Fish Commission engineer Hector Von Baer selected a site surrounding several springs at the south end of Spearfish, known as Ames Canyon. With additional appropriations from Senator Pettigrew, Von Baer drew the plans and a fish hatchery building and ice house were constructed. During the days before electricity, the ice house was a vital structure for storing ice year-round. Blocks of ice were cut from the ponds and placed in the ice house with layers of sawdust used as insulation. The ice was required to preserve the meat that was used to feed the fish, and more ice was used when shipping the fish to lakes and streams. The Spearfish National Fish Hatchery was officially accepted from the contractor July 25, 1899. Although not large, the Spearfish facility was as modern and important as any in the country. D.C. Booth was appointed superintendent of this new facility. Born and raised in New York State and educated at Colgate University, Booth had worked for the U.S. Customs Service before becoming the first Fish Commission employee hired under the provisions of the Civil Service Act. Booth's hatchery experience included Cape Vincent, New York, Woods Hole, Massachusetts, and Leadville, Colorado. He arrived a few days before his 31st birthday as the brightest young star in the Fish Commission's fledgling bureaucracy. A flood the very first year proved to Booth that he had to tame Ames Canyon. Rock walls were built to protect the hatchery springs. Other walls channeled storm drainage from Ames Canyon through the hatchery site and into Spearfish Creek. Booth was especially proud of the stone arch bridge, which carries visitors into the hatchery. Once settled, Booth and his staff turned to their main job, hatching trout. The Spearfish National Fish Hatchery planted its first trout, a total of 25,000 brook trout, at Englewood and Savoy in the Spearfish Canyon area, April 19, 1900. In 1901, D.C. Booth and the Spearfish Hatchery were given responsibility of gathering trout eggs in Lake Yellowstone. However, he received no increase in funds, staff, or equipment. For the next 10 years, Booth made the annual spring trip by rail to Gardner City, Montana, and by wagon and horseback into the park. Some eggs collected were hatched on site, while others were shipped to Spearfish or other hatcheries in America and Europe. Yellowstone boat number 39 on display is one of many built at the Homer Hatchery in Minnesota during the 1920s. The design is a Great Lakes cabin cruiser. The high bows could weather the heavy waves on Lake Yellowstone during storms, and it could carry heavy loads in shallow water. After number 39's useful life ended, it was traded for a load of ready-mix concrete. Discovered in the late 1980s, its owner agreed to donate it for restoration. The Tainter family restored the boat in 5 years. The family had built the original fleet in Homer, Minnesota, and had sailed on them at Lake Yellowstone. Number 39 is a unique slice of America's conservation history. This boat helped establish the great fishing that many people enjoy across the West today. The railroad played a major role in transporting fish for many stocking operations. Fish were placed in iced 10-gallon milk cans and taken as fast as possible to waters where they were to be stocked. Transfers of fish for stocking over longer distances required more special arrangements. Without oxygen, added ice, and other provisions, fish could not survive the rail trips of hundreds of miles. To solve these problems, the U.S. Fish Commission began buying specially constructed fish cars in the late 19th century. Fish cars had their own special uniform crews with living quarters and dining facilities. Between 1881 and 1947, the government owned at least 10 fish cars before the last were retired in the late 1940s. The fish car at D.C. booth is a replica of fish car number 3. Plans for the interior were based on written information, photographs, and the excellent 5-foot model of the car that was made in 1897. The car was purchased from the Black Hills Central Railroad in Hill City. Renovation funding was provided by grants from the Department of Transportation. Side doors were cut into the car and a few windows were moved during the exterior renovation. Volunteer Roger Leslie headed up the interior project, and with the help of many others, the interior reflects the master craftsmanship of the woodwork throughout the car. Despite Booth's busy schedule at the hatchery, he met Miss Ruby Hine, a music teacher at Spearfish Normal School, later Black Hills State University. They were married September 7, 1901. The newlyweds had to live in cramped quarters in 2 small rooms above the hatchery. An impressive 2-story superintendent's home was constructed in 1905. With son Edward and daughter Catherine, the Booth home was the center of school and community activities. There were official hatchery guests, including Secretary of Commerce Herbert Hoover. The Booth family lived in the home until 1933, when D.C. Booth retired. About a dozen other superintendents lived in the residence until 1983. The home was refurbished by the Booth Society and many volunteer hands. Guided tours of this historic home are available. With better roads in the Black Hills by the 1920s and 30s, fishermen could take full advantage of the quality and quantity of trout provided by the Spearfish National Fish Hatchery in Spearfish Canyon. Even President Coolidge was catching Black Hills trout in Custer State Park in 1927. During the 1930s, government WPA workers made improvements on the hatchery grounds. A creek diversion was built to supply the new long raceway ponds. The hatchery continues its work that included research in fish diet and nutrition. As the area grew, upstream water quality was reduced. In 1951, a new federal trout hatchery, McNenny Hatchery west of Spearfish, formed a partnership with Spearfish Hatchery. In the 1960s, the old hatchery building was converted into a training facility for federal fisheries personnel. In an average year during the 1960s and 70s, about 1.5 million trout were stocked and research continued. Over the years, the hatchery has provided a training ground for the expanding research in aquaculture that feeds populations around the world. In 1978, Arden Trandall, a longtime U.S. Fish and Wildlife employee, became superintendent of the Spearfish National Fish Hatchery. In 1980, the Federal Fish Genetics Lab, located at Ranch A in Wyoming, was brought into partnership, forming the Spearfish Fisheries Center. 5 years later, the hatchery and the community were shocked to learn that the Interior Department was closing down the hatchery after 87 years of service. The state of South Dakota took over McNenny, while Ranch A continued its diet research until closing in 1986. The town of Spearfish was not about to let their beloved fish hatchery close. The city took over the operations, although the federal government retained ownership of the property and the museum collection. Arden Trandall felt that he could best serve the hatchery by leaving Fish and Wildlife and becoming the city-employed director to the facility, renamed the D.C. Booth Historic National Fish Hatchery. The people of Spearfish volunteered to continue work on the old hatchery building museum. A viewing deck over the pond was built by the Spearfish Volunteer Fire Department. In 1983, a Friends group was formed to help and advise the hatchery. The group brought together volunteer help and donated dollars to construct a full-size replica of the ice house that once stood on the grounds. They also played a major role in restoration of the superintendent's home. Today, the Booth Society coordinates the volunteer program. Volunteers provide invaluable help with public programs, the gift shop, museum operations, and maintenance of the grounds and buildings. The city of Spearfish provides campsites for non-local volunteers. The work of the society was endorsed by the Fish Culture section of the American Fisheries Society, which chose the D.C. Booth Historic Fish Hatchery as the site of their National Fish Culture Hall of Fame. The Booth Society has also raised money for the creation of outdoor sculptures that add to the beauty and the interest of the grounds. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service then developed a plan making the hatchery its interpretive, educational, and archival site for fisheries nationwide. Today, the Fish and Wildlife Service continues to operate the D.C. Booth Historic National Fish Hatchery, cooperating with 4 partners. They include the South Dakota Department of Game, Fish, and Parks, the Booth Society, the City of Spearfish, and the Fish Culture section of the American Fisheries Society. The South Dakota congressional delegation obtained funding that allowed the construction of a new visitor center and underwater viewing area. Also built was a 12,000 square foot museum management center, housing historical material from all over the country. Adding to the area were accessible walkways and landscaping. There's something about feeding fish that is timeless, and it can keep young and old alike entertained. Today, D.C. Booth Historic Fish Hatchery can be proud of their role in the development and growth of fish research and propagation in the western United States.